The forest canopy swallowed the signal at 0947 hours. $3 million worth of surveillance technology, 4 Skydio X-10 drones, 2 thermal imaging platforms, and a mobile command center that could track a field mouse from 2,000 feet. All of it went dark in the space of 11 seconds, and nobody in that clearing knew what to do. Nobody except the old man sitting on a fallen log, whittling a piece of cedar with a pocket knife. What the drone operators didn't know about that old man would change everything about how they understood tracking. Type respect. If you believe experience still matters, his name was Dale Pressler, 74 years old, silver hair cut short the way he'd worn it since 1968, faded green jacket, work boots that had seen better decades, and hands that looked like they'd been carved from oak. He was there because his grandson, Specialist Ryan Pressler, had invited him. Thought the old man might enjoy watching the demonstration, a fugitive tracking exercise put on by Valcourt Defense Solutions, a private military contractor pitching their autonomous drone surveillance package to Fort Campbell's leadership. The kind of dog and pony show where contractors spend more on the catering than most soldiers earn in a month. Dale hadn't wanted to come. He didn't care much for spectacles, but Ryan had asked, and Dale had never been able to say no to that kid. So he sat on his log at the edge of the command area, staying out of the way, watching the screens and the people watching the screens. The exercise was straightforward. A volunteer, a young sergeant named Colton Briggs, had been given a 90-minute head start into the Daniel Boone National Forest. Dense hardwood, steep ravines, October canopy still thick enough to block most satellite imaging. Briggs was trained in evasion, former ranger. He knew how to move through woods without being seen. The whole point was to prove that Valcourt's drone package could find him anyway. "We'll have him located inside 40 minutes, said the man running the show, Derek Lomax. Mid-40s, pressed khaki pants, company polo stretched across a chest that suggested more time in a gym than any actual field operation. He had the smooth confidence of a man who sold things for a living. Our AI-integrated thermal sweep can distinguish human heat signatures through triple canopy. The target has nowhere to hide." Dale said nothing. He turned the piece of cedar in his hands and let his knife follow the grain. The drones launched clean, 4 of them, fanning out across the search grid in a pattern that Dale recognized, a modified cloverleaf, the kind of sweep he'd seen helicopters attempt over the Ashau Valley a lifetime ago. The screens in the command tent lit up with feeds, thermal overlays, LiDAR mapping, GPS tracking data streaming in real time. It was impressive. Dale would give them that. For about 37 minutes it was impressive. Then the feed started flickering. One drone reported a sensor malfunction, then another lost its GPS lock under the dense canopy. The third hit a wind shear coming off a ridge, and its stabilization system overcorrected, sending it into a hover loop. And the fourth, the flagship unit, the one with the advanced thermal package, simply stopped transmitting. No error code, no malfunction alert, just gone. The command tent went quiet in a way Dale recognized. The silence of people who had been confident and suddenly weren't. "Get them back up," Lomax's voice had lost its showroom polish. "Run the reboot sequence on all 4 units." A young technician, couldn't have been older than 25, was typing frantically. "Sir, the canopy density is interfering with the relay signal. We can't re-establish the mesh network until we get at least 2 units above the tree line." "Then get them above the tree line." "I can't, sir. The autonomous return protocols are fighting the manual override. The AI thinks the safest option is to hold position." Dale's knife paused. He looked up, not at the screens, at the tree line, at the direction the wind was coming from, at the way the October light fell through the canopy about 400 meters to the northeast. He closed his pocket knife and slipped it into his jacket. Colonel Mitchell Vance was standing near the command tent, arms crossed, watching the chaos with the expression of a man who had seen too many contractor presentations to be surprised when they fell apart. Vance was the reason Valcourt was here. He'd authorized the demonstration as part of a procurement evaluation. Fort Campbell was considering the drone package for their reconnaissance training program. $3 million, and right now $3 million was sitting in the trees doing nothing. "How long to get them back online?" Vance asked. His voice was calm, the kind of calm that made junior officers nervous. Lomax wiped his forehead. 30 minutes, maybe 40. We need to manually retrieve at least 1 unit and reset the mesh relay." "Your pitch said 40 minutes to locate the target. It's been 37, and you've lost all 4 platforms." "Colonel, this is an anomaly. The canopy density here is exactly what you'd encounter in any real-world scenario. That's the point. Ryan Pressler was standing near his grandfather. He'd watched the whole thing unfold with a mixture of embarrassment and something else. Something that looked like recognition. He'd heard the stories, every Thanksgiving, every 4th of July. The stories his grandfather told quietly, only when asked, only when the evening had gotten late and the other guests had gone home. "Grandpa," Ryan said quietly, "you could find him." Dale looked at his grandson, didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at the tree line again. Winds out of the northwest. 3, maybe 4 knots. Ground's been soft since Tuesday's rain. If your boy went northeast, and he did, because that's where the ridgeline gives him the best concealment from aerial observation, he's leaving tracks that a blind man could follow. Ryan stared at him. "How do you know he went northeast?" "Because that's where I'd go." Ryan hesitated. Then he walked over to Colonel Vance. Dale watched him go. He didn't want this. Didn't want the attention, the fuss. He'd come to watch his grandson, not to prove anything. But Ryan was already talking, and Vance was already looking in Dale's direction, and Dale knew that look. He'd seen it on the faces of lieutenants in the Central Highlands 55 years ago. The look of a man who needed something done and was running out of options. Vance walked over, measured steps. He stopped in front of Dale and looked at him for a long moment. "Your grandson says you were LRRP." Dale nodded. "Once. What unit?" "Company F, 58th Infantry, Long Range Patrol, later redesignated as Company L, 75th Rangers." Vance's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Vietnam?" 68 to 70, 2 tours, Central Highlands mostly. Some work along the Cambodian border that wasn't officially happening. "Your grandson thinks you can find my target." Dale looked at the tree line. "Your boy's been out there about 2 hours now. He's good. Ryan tells me he's Ranger qualified, but he's moving through soft ground with a 20-pound pack, and he thinks nobody's behind him because all your cameras are down. That makes him careless, not sloppy, just human. And you think you can track him, on foot, in that terrain." Dale stood up from the log, slowly, the way a man stands when his knees have earned every creak and pop. He was 6 feet tall and still carried himself like it mattered. "Colonel, I spent 14 months tracking men through triple canopy jungle who were trying to kill me. Your boy is trying to hide from machines. He's not trying to hide from a man. There's a difference." Lomax had been listening. He stepped forward, and the condescension in his voice was thick enough to cut. "Colonel, with all due respect, we're not going to let a civilian wander into an active exercise area because he thinks he's Davy Crockett. Our systems will be back online and your systems are sitting in trees." Vance didn't look at Lomax. He was still looking at Dale. "Mr. Pressler, I'm not going to order you to do anything, but I'm asking." Dale reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his knife, opened it, closed it. A habit. Something his hands did when his mind was already working. "I'll need a radio, and I'd appreciate it if your people stayed off my trail. Too many boots and I'll be tracking your men instead of your target." Vance handed him a tactical radio from the command table. "Channel 7. Dale took it, clipped it to his belt. Then he walked toward the tree line without another word. Lomax watched him go with an expression that sat somewhere between amusement and irritation. "Colonel, this is a waste of—" "Mr. Lomax, your $3 million system is currently losing an argument with some oak trees. I'd suggest you focus on fixing that." Dale crossed the tree line and the noise of the command area disappeared like someone had closed a door. The forest took over, wind through the canopy, a woodpecker working a dead maple about 60 meters to his left. The soft compression of wet leaves under his boots. He stopped, crouched, looked at the ground the way most people look at a printed page, reading it. There, boot impression, right foot, Vibram sole pattern, probably a Salomon. Pressed deep at the toe, which meant the man was moving uphill. Stride length suggested someone around 5'10", 5'11", carrying weight on his back. The impression was crisp at the edges, which meant it was fresh, laid down within the last 2 hours, before the leaf litter had time to settle back. Dale stood and followed. He moved through the forest the way water moves downhill, finding the path of least resistance, letting the terrain tell him where to go. His eyes never stopped working. A broken spider web across a game trail. Someone had passed through recently because spiders rebuild within hours. A scuff mark on a piece of exposed limestone where a boot had slipped. a branch on a mountain laurel bent backward, the pale underside of the leaves facing up. The man had pushed through here, and the branch hadn't sprung back yet. Give it another hour it would, but right now it was a signpost. 55 years fell away. The forest wasn't Kentucky anymore. It was the Central Highlands, and he was 20 years old, and his 5-man team was 3 days into a patrol that was supposed to last 2. The NVA had been moving troops along a trail network that intelligence said didn't exist, and Dale's team had been sent to prove intelligence wrong. They'd found the trails, they'd found the troops. And then they'd spent 4 days moving through jungle so thick that sunlight was a rumour, staying alive by reading the ground the way Dale was reading it now. Back then, the stakes were different. A misread track meant an ambush. A missed sign meant your team didn't come home. Dale had learned to see things that most people walked right past. The way dew sat differently on a leaf that had been turned over. The way ants changed their pattern around a footprint. The way silence had a texture. The specific quiet that meant something large had recently moved through, and every small creature was still waiting to see if it was safe. He followed the tracks up the ridgeline. The man, Briggs, was good. He'd stayed off the obvious trails, used the rocky spine of the ridge where he could to minimize his footprint, changed direction twice at stream crossings, walking in the water for 30 or 40 meters before exiting on the far side. Standard evasion. Textbook. But textbook has limits, and Dale knew the book. At the second stream crossing, Dale stopped. Briggs had entered the water heading downstream. Most trackers would follow the water looking for the exit point downstream. But Dale looked at the stream bank on the opposite side about 20 meters upstream. There, a single displaced pebble on the bank, its wet underside facing up. Briggs had doubled back, walked upstream in the water, then exited on the opposite bank going uphill. Smart, but the pebble gave him away. Dale keyed the radio. "Command, this is Pressler. Your target crossed the creek at grid reference." He paused, oriented himself using the ridgeline and the sun angle, approximately 873421. He doubled back upstream and exited northeast. He's heading for the rock outcropping above the drainage, probably planning to use the overhang for concealment. Static. Then Vance's voice. "Copy. How far ahead is he?" 30 minutes, maybe less. He slowed down after the creek. Thinks he's clean. Dale kept moving. Faster now because Briggs had gotten comfortable after his creek maneuver and his intervals between evasion techniques had stretched. Dale could see it in the tracks. The stride was longer, more relaxed. The boot impressions were more evenly weighted, less deliberate. The man thought he'd beaten the pursuit. That was the moment Dale always waited for. Not in the exercise, in the war. The moment when the quarry believed they were safe. That's when they stopped looking behind them. That's when the pattern shifted from escape to travel, and travel leaves tracks like a highway. 20 minutes later, Dale could smell him. Not literally, although in Vietnam you could. Fish sauce and tobacco. Here it was subtler, sunscreen. The chemical tang of insect repellent. Dale stopped behind a massive tulip poplar and listened, breathing. 40 meters ahead, slightly downslope, behind a shelf of sandstone where the rock face created a natural overhang. Exactly where Dale had predicted. He keyed the radio one more time. "Command, target located. He's under the rock shelf on the northeast face of the drainage, approximately 100 meters above the creek. 40 meters from my position. Time is," he checked his watch, 1038 hours. Back at the command area, the silence was different this time. Not the silence of failure. The silence of people trying to process what they'd just heard. Colonel Vance looked at the mission clock. Dale Pressler had been in the woods for 41 minutes, on foot, with a pocket knife and a radio, and he'd found a ranger-qualified soldier hiding in 6,000 acres of dense forest. The drone technician looked up from his console. "Sir, I've got one unit back online. Thermal is showing a heat signature exactly where Mr. Pressler indicated." Vance allowed himself the smallest smile. "Confirmed." Lomax was standing very still. His face had gone through several colours in the last few minutes and had settled on something pale and rigid. His phone was in his hand, but he wasn't using it. There was nobody to call. His $3 million system had been outperformed by a 74-year-old man with bad knees and a cedar whittling habit. Ryan Pressler was grinning. He couldn't help it. When Dale walked back into the command area 20 minutes later, Briggs was with him. The young sergeant had a look on his face that Ryan had seen before, on the faces of people hearing his grandfather's stories for the first time. Not disbelief exactly, something closer to recalibration. The adjustment that happens when you realize the world is bigger and older and more capable than you thought. "He was just standing there," Briggs said to no one in particular, "behind a tree, 40 meters away. I never heard him. I never saw him. He just appeared and said, 'You're dead, son,' twice over. I about jumped out of my skin." Dale sat back down on his log, pulled out his piece of cedar and his knife, said nothing. Colonel Vance walked over. He didn't speak immediately. He stood there for a moment, the way officers stand when they're choosing their words carefully. Then he extended his hand. Dale looked at it, then took it. "Mr. Pressler, I served with men from the 75th at Bagram. I know what LRRP teams did in Vietnam. The missions your people ran, the kind that never made the papers, never got the recognition. 5 men behind enemy lines for days. No air support, no extraction plan. Reading the jungle to stay alive." Dale's jaw tightened. "Just slightly," Vance continued. His voice carried across the clearing now, and every soldier and technician and contractor had stopped what they were doing to listen. "Your unit, Company F, 58th Infantry, ran over 200 long-range patrols in the Central Highlands between 1968 and 1970. Some of the most dangerous reconnaissance missions of the entire war. Your teams operated in areas where conventional units refused to go. You gathered intelligence that saved hundreds, possibly thousands, of American lives, and you did it by reading the ground, by understanding terrain and movement and human behavior in ways that no machine has ever replicated." He turned to Lomax. "Mr. Lomax, your technology has value. I'm not dismissing it. But today you watched a man do in 41 minutes what your system couldn't do at all. And he did it with skills that were old before your company existed. Skills that are disappearing because we've convinced ourselves that sensors and algorithms can replace human judgment and fieldcraft." Lomax opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Colonel, the conditions today were realistic. That's the whole point." Vance turned back to Dale. "Mr. Pressler, I'd like to invite you to speak with our reconnaissance training cadre. What you demonstrated today, the tracking methodology, the terrain reading, the behavioral prediction, that's institutional knowledge that we're losing, and we can't afford to lose it." Dale was quiet for a long moment. The knife moved along the cedar. A curl of wood fell to the ground. "I'm just an old man who knows how to walk in the woods, Colonel." "No, sir. You're a soldier who never stopped being one." Ryan put his hand on his grandfather's shoulder. Dale didn't look up, but his hand, the one holding the knife, was trembling. Not from age, not from the walk, from something deeper than that. From 55 years of carrying missions that nobody talked about, sacrifices that nobody saw, skills that the world had decided were obsolete. And here was a colonel telling him they weren't. Briggs walked over, stood in front of Dale. Then he did something that made Ryan's throat tighten. He stood at attention, parade ground straight, and he saluted. Dale looked up, met the young sergeant's eyes, and slowly, deliberately he stood. Returned the salute with a precision that 55 years hadn't dulled. A gesture from another era, exchanged between two soldiers separated by half a century, but connected by something that no technology could replicate or replace. Lomax quietly packed his laptop into its case. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. That evening, Ryan drove Dale home. They didn't talk much. They never did after moments like this. But at a red light, Dale said something that Ryan would remember for the rest of his life. "The forest talks, Ryan. It always has. You just have to be quiet enough to listen." The next week, Dale Pressler stood in front of 40 soldiers at Fort Campbell and taught a 3-hour class on visual tracking. No slides, no technology. Just a man, a patch of dirt, and a lifetime of knowledge that he'd carried alone for too long. Every soldier in that room passed the lesson forward. Some skills aren't obsolete. They're just waiting for someone to remember they matter, and some heroes don't carry medals on their chest. They carry them in the way they walk through a forest, quiet, patient, and seeing everything that the rest of us have forgotten how to see. If this story moved you, the next one will stay with you for days. A retired Navy SEAL was working as a school janitor. When an active shooter entered the building, what he did in the next 90 seconds left the entire police department speechless. Subscribe for more stories of hidden heroes who earned their rest but never lost their edge. Comment tracker, if you believe old school skills still matter, And hit that like button if you think our veterans deserve more than a thank you. They deserve to be heard.